The 19th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. I invite delegates to take their seats. Before turning to the item on our agenda for this meeting, I should like to draw the General Assembly's attention to document A/48/414 Addendum 5. In a letter contained in that document, the Secretary-General informs me that since the issuance of his communications dated 21st, 24th, 27th and 29th September and 4th of October 1993, the Gambia has made the necessary payment to reduce its arrears below the amount specified in Article 19 of the Charter. May I take it that the General Assembly duly takes note of this information? It is so decided. L'Assemblée va d'abord.
The Assembly will first hear a statement by His Excellency Major General Juvénal Habyarimana, President of the Republic of Rwanda. I request the Chief of Protocol to escort the President.
Au nom de l'Assemblée.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations the President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Major General Juvénal Habyarimana, and to invite him to address the General Assembly. Mr. President, I am experiencing simultaneously the feeling of a signal honor and genuine pleasure, and also a deep feeling at this time when, on behalf of my country, Rwanda, I am taking the floor before this prestigious General Assembly of the United Nations, which each year takes up the destiny of our world. But above all, Mr. President, I should like to associate myself with the preceding eminent speakers on this rostrum to extend to you, on behalf of the delegation of which I am the head, our warmest congratulations on your election to the presidency of the 48th session of the United Nations General Assembly. We are convinced that your personal qualities, as well as your extensive experience in international issues, will assist you in discharging this difficult responsibility. Your personal qualities and your experience are the best guarantee of the success of the work of the present session. We also wish to congratulate all the other members of the Bureau, who, we are sure, will spare no efforts to assist you in successfully discharging the difficult task entrusted to you. The delegation of the Republic of Rwanda will spare no effort, Mr. President, to participate actively and effectively to ensure a successful conclusion of debate on the agenda items for this session. Moreover, we wish to render a well-deserved tribute to your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Stoyan Ganev, who has always been inspired by the same concern for effectiveness in the cause of peace, justice, and international security. He deserves our deep gratitude for having guided with wisdom and competence the work of the 47th session of the General Assembly of our organization. We also should like to take advantage of this fortunate opportunity to warmly welcome the presence here with us of new member states whose admission is an important stage in achieving the universality of our organization. Mr. President, this 48th session of the United Nations General Assembly is opening at a time when the world presents to us a rather gloomy portrait. Here and there are several scattered islets of peace and prosperity, but they are few indeed. Moreover, in various corners of the globe, armed conflicts and political tensions are ready to explode into open crises, economic and social ruin. In a great number of countries, poverty, upheavals in the quest for more balanced societies. And throughout, there is anguish in the face of so many challenges which rise up to face the conscience of man and which spawn fear for the future. Fortunately, goodwill is being demonstrated and is being mobilized on the level of states, non-governmental organizations, and regional and international organizations, in the forefront of which is the United Nations, to arouse universal conscience, to extinguish the fires, accompany political change, allay misery, and renew hope and enjoyment of life for those for whom the horizons seem closed and gloomy. It is an appropriate time and place, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, to pay a sincere tribute to our World Organization and to its tireless Secretary General, for Dr. Boutros Boutros-Ghali, for all the actions undertaken and carried out with skill, designed to restore peace in regions and countries devastated by war, to prevent other conflicts, to assist disadvantaged peoples or those sorely tried by disasters of all types. To be sure, the means are limited, but is not this organization the last hope of peoples? And success nurtures that hope. Thus we welcome enthusiastically the end of the civil war in Cambodia and the re-establishment of state institutions in that country. Rwanda welcomes the progress made toward a settlement of the conflict in Mozambique and is following particularly closely the political developments in South Africa. While the system of apartheid has not yet been fully stopped in South Africa, recent developments promise positive, rapid developments. Rwanda is also most gratified by the very positive course of the peace negotiations in the Middle East, which have just gone through a very important stage thanks to mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO and the signing on the 13th of September 1993 in Washington of an agreement on Palestinian autonomy in Gaza and in Jericho. We hope that this historic agreement, which has laid down the basis for a reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians, will open the way to a lasting solution to all of the issues linked to the problem of the Middle East and to the ultimate advent of peace and calm to this part of the world. It is for this purpose that we call on the international community to redouble its efforts to achieve positive results for the efforts now underway to settle the conflicts in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Liberia, Angola, Somalia, and everywhere else where peoples are being battered, divided, and plunged into misery by individual or tribal egoism and ambition, or threatened in their sovereignty by the frenzied greed of other states. Mr. President, on the level of international economic relations, it still is depressing to note that 3/4 of mankind lives on the sidelines of economic and social progress, insofar as numerous structural imbalances continue to hobble the countries of the South in their efforts at self-development and international cooperation. Indeed, despite the concerted efforts of integration, despite the internal adjustments which are continually carried out at the cost of enormous sacrifices, despite the goodwill expressed in international partnership, the foreign debt continues to grow, and the gap between the economies of the North and the South continues to expand. The delegation of Rwanda is convinced that to improve the lot of mankind, the international community must provide for appropriate measures designed to promote the emergence of a new international world economic order which is more equitable and more balanced. Here, only the shared political will of all the members of our organization can assist in righting the structural imbalances of the global economy and in opening the way to a new partnership in which interdependence will mean, first and foremost, the shared destiny of mankind, and one in which international cooperation will be even more synonymous with a success that benefits all the partners, a sign of fraternity, and the promise of genuine solidarity. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Rwanda has always believed that international cooperation, to be more effective, must be even more the result of intense, transparent, consistent, and precise agreed-upon action with our partners, undertaken in what must be considered one day as a genuine contract of solidarity. Rwanda has always believed that well-thought-through cooperation implies the concept of co-management, of co-responsibility, which means therefore shared responsibility, ongoing dialogue, the transparency of commitments, and the acceptance of the right to mistakes on all sides, so that even more than in the past, cooperation can meet the stakes of the future. For it to become even more genuinely cooperation, the international community must seek an effective solution to all of these challenges, which are leading us into institutionalized crushing debt. In addition, international cooperation can only strengthen its scope and its impact through a genuine integration of action, of programs in a national strategic context, in a global vision of authentic self-development. Rwanda has always attached special importance to international cooperation, to which it owes so much of its progress, of its development, and of its gains. Mr. President, concerning the political situation of Rwanda, my country, as you know, is emerging from an unjust, pointless, and undeserved war, which has been imposed on it some 3 years ago, since the 1st of October 1990. Before sketching out for you the situation in which this war has plunged the population of Rwanda and the economy of the country, allow me to emphasize once again the role of the international community in resolving crises and conflicts. For the end of this war in my country is the result of a miracle of international solidarity. To be sure, it required the goodwill of the two parties to the conflict. Wisdom prevailed over ambition. Hatred yielded to the need of the survival of the nation. But the will of the two parties to pool their efforts was strongly supported by Rwanda's neighboring countries, among which they, by shared agreement, selected a mediator, the Republic of Zaire, and a facilitator, the United Republic of Tanzania. The two warring parties have also benefited from the skilled assistance of President Abdou Diouf of Senegal, then acting president of the Organization of African Unity, and of certain friendly countries, France, Belgium, the Federal Republic of Germany, and the United States of America, in addition to the most valuable assistance of the Organization of African Unity and of the United Nations. All of these countries and international organizations, in fact, sent to Arusha in Tanzania representatives to the peace negotiations begun in Zaire following the launching of hostilities, and which continued in Tanzania for a year with their presence, and which culminated in a peace agreement. I should like to take this opportunity once again to express to all these countries and organizations the sincere gratitude of the government and people of Rwanda for their greatly valued contribution to the positive outcome of the negotiations, which were most trying for all the parties, and which on numerous occasions were on the verge of breaking down, were it not for the tenacity and the firm will of the two parties, and also the wise and firm advice of all friends there present. Mr. President, this senseless war which struck Rwanda is now dying down, thanks to the peace agreement signed in Arusha the 4th of August of this year. It was bloody and destructive. We mourn the dozens of thousands of victims. The war destroyed a considerable number of infrastructure, equipment, and socio-economic and administrative structures, and left in dire poverty more than 900,000 displaced persons whose property went up in smoke. That war has left us orphans and invalids of all ages, widows and helpless old people, hundreds of thousands of economic victims. The regions affected by the war are prey to misery and desolation. School enrollment has been severely jeopardized, and the psychological consequences for the most vulnerable age groups are doubtless incalculable. This war has tipped the food balance, which was already fragile, and spurred on famine, which has struck the entire country, since it exploded in the most fertile regions of the country, which have not been cultivated for 3 years now. The delegates of international bodies and non-governmental organizations who were able to visit the camps of the displaced persons cannot forget the devastating sight of these makeshift shelters, where hundreds of thousands of human beings continue to live crammed in highly unsanitary conditions, a life on the brink of the unbearable. These delegates cannot forget the long lines of hungry people on the roads seeking assistance which the international community had sent them, and which it was difficult to have arrive to them to allow them to survive. And what can we say of the economy in general? Already badly upset, it is today even further ruined, following the enormous expenditures resulting from the war and from the destruction which it caused. Thus, after the signing of the Arusha Peace Agreement, the time has now come for work, long-term, enormous work, of national reconstruction in peace and renewed calm, without forgetting the other no less important objective, namely the implementation of national reconciliation and the continuation of strengthening of the process of democratization in the management of the country. Here, we can already welcome the establishment of a multi-party system through the constitutional review of the 10th of June 1991, thanks to which 17 political parties were agreed on then, and 5 of them are now presently forming a transition government, which soon will be expanded to the Rwanda Patriotic Front for a new interim period designed to lead to pluralist, free, and democratic elections. On the economic level, Rwanda has been experiencing a crisis since the 80s, a crisis which has had negative repercussions on the implementation of the budget and which has been exacerbated not only by the war, but also by the unpredictable nature of external shocks, in particular the collapse of the international price of coffee, our primary export. As the growth of public expenditures and that of the fundamental imbalance of the trade balance, along with a production system characterized by a very fragile structure, could no longer be controlled, my country implemented, in November 1990, a program of recovery having the following priorities: relaunching the economy, the search for internal and external financial balance, the advancement of domestic savings, encouragement of activity of the private sector, and improving the management of the public sector. The Structural Adjustment Program of Rwanda has had great support by all of the donors, technically and financially, and headed by the Bretton Woods institutions. Unfortunately, the launching of this program, which the government apparently could have carried out without excessive difficulty, coincided with that attack of October 1990. From this rostrum, I should like most solemnly to thank the international community, which has supported Rwanda, both with assistance in the balance of payments and with development projects. We are even more grateful for the priority given by the international community to assistance to displaced persons displaced by the war, in answer to the joint appeal launched by the Department of Humanitarian Affairs of the United Nations, whose dedication is inestimable. Following the war and the new deterioration of the terms of trade in the economy of Rwanda, the very backbone of our structural adjustment program is threatened. I am speaking here of the liberalization of external and internal trade, which requires a situation with reserves of exchange. The government of Rwanda has just decided on the outstanding features of its short and medium-term economic policy from 1993 to 1996 in the post-war context, items which we have submitted to the international community. This policy reflects the commitment of the government to do all in its power to stabilize the great financial balances and to launch the process of economic recovery, basing itself on this fundamental strategy of the Structural Adjustment Program, which attaches a key role to market forces. In a word, there is a need to capitalize on the positive results of the measures established since November 1990 and to plan for new measures required by the deterioration of short and medium-term economic prospects linked to the war. And, therefore, in accordance with the contents of the peace agreement, the priorities of the transition government with an expanded base are those of pursuing efforts at economic recovery and to work on the 4 programs for specifically post-war economic development, namely emergency assessment to those displaced by the war and assistance to returning them to their property, assistance in the reintegration of Rwandan refugees, assistance in reconstruction, assistance in the social and economic reintegration of demobilized military personnel. For the repatriation of Rwandan refugees in accordance with the Declaration of Dar es Salaam of the 19th of February 1991, a donors meeting on the initiative of the government, the OAU, and the HCR will be organized. We have noted with the war destructions of all types, and above all, the deterioration and destruction of thousands of hectares of forest, which will even further aggravate the wood shortage. With the end of the war, the country will have to have available the costs for demobilization of more than 31,000 people in the military, and for them, we will have to find, on the level of the entire country, paying jobs and training, which can facilitate their social and economic reintegration. It is in the framework of the preparation of programs of reconstruction and the preparation of these reconstruction programs and socio-economic reintegration of demobilized military personnel that I have personally sent a request to the Secretary General of the United Nations, dated the 2nd of January 1993, and that an interagency mission of the UN system and of UNDP are at present involved in backing the government of Rwanda in the preparation of the document to be submitted to the donors at a roundtable for humanitarian emergency assistance. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Rwanda is thus trying to manage its meager resources in an extremely
Rwanda
is thus trying to manage its meager resources in an extremely difficult context. But it remains committed to a strategy of economic development contained in its structural adjustment program, launched in November 1990, with as its basis the process of economic liberalization, which has already been begun, and by giving to the private sector an enhanced role in decision-making. In signing the peace agreement, the government of Rwanda has firmly committed itself to strengthening the basis of a state of law in which public freedoms will be guaranteed, together with political rights, justice, and equality. In this agreement, the two parties have agreed that a National Commission for Human Rights, an independent commission, will be established, entrusted with considering violations of human rights carried out by anyone on Rwandan territory, in particular by state bodies and by individuals on the cover of the state or various organizations. Simultaneously, the government will make an effort to improve the functioning of the judicial system and of the penal regime by forbidding arbitrary arrests, abusive arrests, and inhumane treatment of detainees, and by severely punishing the perpetrators of such acts. The human, financial, and material means of the countries are extremely limited, and therefore an appeal will be made to financial and technical external assistance, in particular in the area of the training of magistrates and officials of the public ministry and officers of the Ministry of Justice. The government of Rwanda has also reaffirmed in the peace agreement its will ultimately to resolve the problem of the refugees, as it had committed itself to doing in the Declaration of Dar es Salaam of the 19th of February 1991, during the regional summit which examined the problem of Rwandan refugees. The task, therefore, will be a difficult one for the transition government with an expanded basis, provided for by the Arusha Agreement within the framework of the Protocol on Sharing of Power between the internal political forces and the Rwandan Patriotic Front. This government will be established in the next few days, as soon as the prerequisites will have been met. The task will also be a difficult one for the entire people of Rwanda, which is ultimately the major author and beneficiary of progress and of that well-being we hope to find. Despite the will and the determination of the people of Rwanda and its government, we must acknowledge that the internal means available fall far short given the colossal work which remains ahead. Thus, we expect from the international community support and a supplement to our own efforts. Mr. President, the first contribution expected from the international community is the establishment, as quickly as possible, of a neutral international force, also provided for by the Arusha Agreement. And on behalf of the people of Rwanda, I should like to present to the United Nations in general and to members of the Security Council in particular our feelings of gratitude for the historic decision which our organization took yesterday by adopting the resolution which established the United Nations Assistance Mission to Rwanda, which has been so long awaited for the implementation of the Arusha Peace Agreement. The agreement assigns to this force a general task of contributing to the implementation of the peace agreement, specifically by supervising the implementation of the protocol on the integration of the armed forces of the two parties, and by supplying all kinds of assistance to the authorities and the competent bodies. More specifically, the agreement assigns it inter alia the tasks of security, which include the following: to guarantee the general security of the country and to verify how the authorities and competent bodies are providing for the maintenance of public order, to contribute to ensuring the security of the civilian population, carry out demining operations, contribute to the search for arms caches and the neutralization of armed bands throughout the country, to control, respect by the two parties, of means for a final cessation of hostilities as contained in the peace agreement. Finally, the Arusha Agreement entrusts the international neutral force with the tasks of supervising the process of the forming of the national army, and I shall mention here only supervision of the operation of the disengagement of forces, supervision of the operation of the demobilization of the military and gendarmes, and participation in the training program for members of the new armed forces. This is to emphasize how the establishment of this international neutral force is needed and is urgent, to allow for the formation of the transition government with an expanded base, the reinstallation of those displaced by the war, the repatriation of refugees, and in a general manner, national reconstruction in these conditions of maximum security. Another extremely vital contribution awaited from the international community, more specifically from the United Nations system, and on the bilateral level from friendly countries and the various non-governmental organizations, will be that of the financing of priority programs to which I referred a few moments ago. Today, more than ever, Rwanda needs the attention, concern, and the goodwill of the international community. It is counting on the generosity of that community for its recovery to return from the throes of war. May that hope be realized very soon. Backed by the international community, the people of Rwanda thus is hoping for a smooth transition period which, despite the markers charted by the peace agreement, may be trying. But the people of Rwanda are counting on patriotism and the sense of responsibility which much characterize their political authorities and the leaders of the parties participating in the government and the National Assembly of Transition to consolidate democratic gains and once and for all to lay down the basis for peace and national harmony. Once the demons of division have been exorcised, there can be no doubt that the people of Rwanda will build a new nation and will experience, once again, unbroken progress. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, during the present session, there will be elections for a number of seats in the Security Council. Rwanda has officially put forward its candidacy for a non-permanent seat in this forum entrusted with peace and international security. Its candidacy was endorsed by the last summit of the OAU, held in Cairo at the end of June this year. As the head of state, I call for the confidence of your august assembly in my country, Rwanda, which has never yet had a seat in the Security Council. As a state which is concerned to carry out its responsibilities on the international level as well, Rwanda believes that it can, today even more than yesterday, make its modest contribution to the maintenance of peace in the world and to the restoration of peace in troubled regions and countries. As it is now emerging itself from a war which has so sorely tried it, Rwanda knows full well the price of peace, that peace which it has just regained in particular through the efforts of the international community. These, Mr. President, are the reasons which have made Rwanda put forward its candidacy for a non-permanent seat in the Security Council. To assist other nations at war in restoring peace, but also to work together with the other members of the Security Council to consolidate peace within its own borders. Rwanda hopes that it will have your confidence. An ancient country under the trusteeship of the United Nations throughout the period which preceded its accession to national independence, my country, Rwanda, which has just emerged from the throes of a nameless war and anxious to reconstruct by drawing the lessons of the past, has every good reason to consider that it is mature and to assure you of its unswerving determination to work for the advent of peace in this world and for understanding among nations. On its behalf, I renew to our organization, the United Nations, our sincere wishes for success, for flourishing, and for the happiness of all of mankind. Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Rwanda for the statement he has just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while the Secretary General and I escort the President.